people often say, is the glass half full or half empty? Right? The pessimist says, is it, it's half empty. An optimist, you might think, says it's half full, but really, I say, who cares? It's refillable. Let's not just look at what the status quo is. Let's look at what the possibility is. Look at what the potential could be.
Evan, thanks so much for coming on Confessions of an Implementer. A lot to talk about today. I remember when we sat down and we're talking about your journey, and the interesting thing is, like, you were raised in an entrepreneurial family, and so you had that exposure very early on, and then you went to Walmart, and it seemed like that journey was also incredible. Then you went back to the family business and did a whole bunch of amazing things. But let's start with what it was like growing up in an entrepreneurial household.
Sure. Well, firstly, thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here. I'm a fifth generation entrepreneur, so it was kind of in my blood. My dad, my grandfather, great grandfather, and so great grandfather actually as well. And so as I was growing up, I always figured I'd go into the family business. And we sold yarn for knitting and crocheting. But I was a childhood entrepreneur. As early as sixth grade, I was selling snacks and comic books out of my locker and knapsack. I just always needed to be selling something. And I didn't know it at the time. I probably couldn't even spell entrepreneur back then. But it was one of those things that was just natural. I was always comfortable selling things that I was passionate about. That was kind of the one kicker. I had to be passionate about it, because if I didn't care about it, it just didn't resonate for me. That being said, when I went through school and graduate school, I was going for a marketing management degree and then later an international business degree. I had some summer jobs working in the family business, the warehouse and inventory management, all those fun things. But I remember going to my dad one day and saying, all right, I think it's time for me to join the business. And he said, well, the only thing is you got to work elsewhere for at least 2 years before you could join the family business. I said, well, how did I not know this? Well, it's an unwritten family rule, and we want to make sure that people are not just coming because they, are part of the, the DNA selection pool, but rather it's because they want to be here and they can contribute something. So you got to work elsewhere first and learn what it's like to work for someone else before you could join business and ultimately over time become an owner. As I said, it makes sense. So I figured there's no better place to learn about business than the world's largest company. And so there was a local Walmart. I live in New York, Long Island. There was a new store opening up. This is going back a ways, back in 2003. And the store in Valley Stream was opening up. And I said, all right, let me go apply for a job. And I frankly didn't really know specifically what I wanted to do. I just figured, hey, I got to go get some experience. Let me go do that. So I applied for a job. I was hired as an hourly associate, as a department manager. What I didn't know through the application process was there were over 10,000 applicants for that one store. And there were only 400 jobs that they were hiring for. Had I known that, I probably would have been a lot more nervous going in. But because my dad had been selling to Walmart for many years, and I grew up playing with a Walmart truck as early as 3 years old. So I was an early Walmart truck driver. I still have that truck at home, by the way. So I think I might have been the only candidate who came in who knew Walmart's 3 basic beliefs coming into the interview without having to look it up on a website somewhere. It was just part of the DNA. So I was hired as an hourly associate. 6 months later, was promoted into their management training program, became an assistant store manager after that 4-month training program, which was really intensive and it was both hands-on learning as well as both computer-based and text-based. So there was a multitude of learning paths that they had every manager go through before they were able to become an assistant salaried member of management, assistant store manager. And so what happened was I got training on people, on merchandising, on systems, on process, on compliance. I mean, I had to learn everything, how to cut keys and get fish out of the fish tank to sell guns and like you name it. I had to learn every single legal and compliance process that was necessary to be able to ensure that I was able to uphold those for not only the safety of the employees and the associates, but for the safety of the customers and for the best customer experience. And so that process led me to become an assistant store manager, where I did that for about 3 years, worked on special projects, grand openings, remodels, a whole smattering of different things. I worked in 11 stores over about a 4 year span. And so I really got from the ground up a great foundation in how to run and operate a great business from the Fortune 1, which was really valuable. And I like to say I got a degree in retail over that 4 year span without a certificate, but I got more than that. I really got some great hands-on learning, not just in how to deal with people and how to understand how to solve issues and have the autonomy to make decisions, but also in working with leaders of varying different companies, varying sizes, very like the open door policy was a real thing. I got to speak with anyone and everyone, whether they were coming for a store visit or got to meet the Walmart board of directors when they came for the grand opening in White Plains when I helped open that store. So really got to build relationships up and down and side to side throughout not only that organization but others, because as you can imagine, everybody's trying to get into Walmart and trying to figure out how to tap into their reach, because there's about 330, 350 million people in the United States. 90% of America lives within 10 miles of a Walmart store, and shops at Walmart. I think every if not every week, but certainly every month. So it's a staggering statistic. But it's what I learned was that it's not about the global, it's more about the local. And if every store can take care of its local community and give back to the local community and provide support and assistance and financial resources, and giving back was something that was very much a part. And there were always different contests of how to support, whether it was Children's Miracle Network or just a smattering of different charities that were not only national but local. And so, how can we help the local schools, um, the local community needs? And I think back to some of the unfortunate catastrophes that have happened over the years, over the last 20 years or so in the United States, whether it was Hurricane Katrina or even 9/11 in New York. I mean, the first responders after so after the firefighters and the police and everybody else, like after that, it was Walmart trucks rolling in with supplies, with resources. So it's an amazing thing to be a part of a company that is so help first and really out to help the community. And I got to see from the inside how that mindset really permeates throughout everyone that's involved. And so I really got a great foundation there. Fast forward about 17, 18 years ago, joined the family business, spent the first year streamlining some operational efficiencies, and then moved into sales. I took over our international sales and e-commerce divisions, and over the subsequent 12 years helped grow those areas about 25x. And then I took on sales responsibility for the entire company. And as chief sales officer, I was responsible for those big relationships, the Walmarts and the Michaels and the Joannes and Amazon and Hobby Lobby, et cetera. And, taking the company from one continent to five was, exhausting, but exuberating and exhilarating as well. It was a lot of fun running around the world. I was focused just on the one planet. That was my target market. So, I used to say, my mission was global domination of the Yarniverse. That was what I was going for, but one planet at a time. Musk and Branson and Bezos, they weren't yet trying to conquer some other planets, so it was easy to stay focused. But then, as much as I saw success on the sales side of things, you can imagine as a fifth generation family business with as many as 8 family members, yeah, there could be a little bit of a lack of alignment, let's say, at times. Some frustration that I and some others had. And it's totally common and totally normal in, frankly, every family business. And so I don't know that we were unique in that regard. Every company thinks they're unique and thinks that they're special, and they are in their own way. But so many of the company issues that present themselves exist everywhere. And we just, we don't realize how similar those issues are until we step out of our, maybe, 4x4 little box that we create for ourselves. And so as I was trying to combat some of those frustrations, it was back in 2016. I remember I had joined an executive peer group in February of that year. And a few months later, I was sharing some of my frustrations with the other members of the group. And one of the members said, "Hey, have you ever heard of this thing called EOS?" I said, "No, what's that?" He said, "Well, it's just a way of harnessing the human energy in your business so that you could run a better business and, frankly, live a better life." I said, "Well, that sounds good. I'd like to hear more." He said, "Well, let me introduce you to my implementer." I said, "What's an implementer?" He's like, "Don't worry about it. Just speak to this guy." I said, "All right." This guy's name was Barry. When Barry tells you to do something, you listen because he sold his business not once but twice, and the second time was for 300 million. So when Barry tells you to talk to somebody, you talk to the guy. So I spoke to him, and we ended up bringing him in. He met with our ownership team, our leadership team, and we ended up implementing EOS in our business using a professional EOS implementer. And we worked with him for about 2.5 years. And what we did over the course of that time was we really gained a lot more clarity around the vision for the organization. We had a lot of visionaries in the business, but what we didn't have is enough traction. We didn't have enough discipline and accountability. We had a little bit, I would say, and this is also very common, not just in family businesses, but in small to medium sized businesses where people who have their areas of responsibility, they take ownership and they take pride in those. But sometimes that can go a little bit too far, and people are not as willing to work as collaboratively as perhaps the you know the company needs. And so that did present itself before we had started implementing EOS. I think a lot more prevalently. But when we implemented EOS, we gained a lot more discipline, a lot more accountability. We got a lot more clear on who was accountable for what functions existed in the business, where we maybe had some holes missing. We had some folks that were serving in title in certain ways, but they weren't functioning in terms of the holistic aspect of the entire business for that particular department or function. And so we smoked out a whole bunch of issues. We addressed those and solved them and built a healthier, cohesive team. I'm not going to sit here and tell you everything was rainbows and butterflies. There were certainly some contested decisions, but one of the things that I think, as I reflect back, that was, I think, one of the most impactful decisions that came, in my opinion, directly as a result of implementing EOS, was in 2020, in the height of COVID. We brought in our first non-family president and CEO in the company's 146-year history. That's a
Wow.
big deal. I mean, I got to tell you, on the scale of miraculous proportions, there's like the splitting of the Red Sea, and then like 8 family members agreeing on that decision, probably a smidge below that. That's how impactful that was, because you can imagine, you have 2 family members, you have 3 opinions, you have 8, exponentially more. Um, so, but what happened was once we brought in a real professional to run the day to day, to run the business without the drama and the stuff that gets in the way, I think oftentimes of focusing really on the business, is we then started getting private equity offers to buy a majority of the company, and some were interested in that, some weren't. We ultimately had more interest in it staying in the family than it going to private equity. And so those who were interested in staying offered to buy out those who were willing to sell. And so there was, I think, as good of an outcome as there could have been, given, what I know happens in so many family businesses around, not just around the country, but around the world. And so at the end of 2021, myself and 3 family members successfully exited the business. We sold to our cousins who are running the business today. And so it's still in the family today. And my dad and my uncle, they retired and are spending a lot more time with their family and doing things, traveling and things that they love. And I have always been passionate about helping entrepreneurs get more of what they want from their business. So it was a natural progression for me to then become a professional EOS implementer. And so I went and got trained in the early part of 2022 to do this. And so it's been 2.5, almost not quite 3 years, but almost 3 years since I successfully exited the business. And I love the fact that I get to help other entrepreneurs get what they want from their business, just like I was able to. And so because I've had the sales experience and obviously the experience implementing EOS, one of the other things that I did recently is I became certified as an outgrow advisor. And what that means is I get to help teams that are trying to fix their sales revenue issue of not enough. I've yet to meet a business owner who said, "I have too much revenue. I don't know what to do with it. I can't handle anymore. Stop." Like most business owners are not saying that. It's usually like, "I can't figure out how to grow revenue predictably," and that's the key. It's systematically and predictably. And so Alex Goldfein, who's I think a three-time Wall Street Journal best-selling author, wrote a number of books like Pick Up the Phone and Sell and Selling Boldly, 5 Minute Selling. So he trained myself and about 18 others just about a month ago to be able to help our clients and companies create systematic, predictable revenue growth to the tune of 15 to 30% year over year, with a proven process that's been, he's been doing this for over 20 years. So this stuff really works. So it's that, you have that bucket with the leaky holes of like, okay, you got stuff, this sales, it's not sales training, it's sales doing. It fills those holes. And so whether it's helping the holistic company implement EOS and working with the leadership team to be able to help them, or helping companies grow their predictable revenue issues and actually grow in a way that makes sense, doing things that they know how to do, but it's about actually getting the things done, taking action, tracking the data, making sure that we're making educated decisions on real data, is so empowering and energizing to me. And it's interesting. I have kind of a third leg of the stool, which I've been focusing on as well more recently, as well as doing more public speaking, keynotes, breakouts, workshops, things like that, because these are all ways that I can, like, my magnetic north is helping to positively impact at least 1,000 companies directly by 2030. That's my core target. So everything that I'm doing is rowing in that direction, whether it's helping to implement EOS for leadership teams that are growth oriented and open minded, or helping teams that are trying to figure out their sales challenges and how to create more revenue, or inspiring audiences and helping leaders really learn different tips and tricks and disciplines that they can use to be more impactful in their ways. And when I was thinking about it, I said, well, it's interesting. EOS, outgrow, speaking, those are kind of the three legs to my stool. And the acronym there is EOS. So EOS is the underpinning of all of it. And so the fact that EOS and outgrow and speaking all spell that, if you put them together, I thought it was pretty interesting.
That's awesome. Um, there is so much to unpack in all of that. Like, as you were going through some of the stories as you were growing up, like that reminded me of some of my stories as well. So it was sixth grade for you, and it sounded like you were hustling, selling stuff out of your locker. Me, I was selling creepy crawlers in Mrs. Price's third grade class until she shut me down. But it's really interesting of, like, the influences around us as we're growing up, and like what we gravitate towards and kind of where we find our ultimate purpose. You also talked about this notion of getting inside of an organization at the ground level and understanding all aspects and how that organization operates, and the insight and perspective that has given you, not just as you continue to move up the ladder in Walmart, but also as you transitioned into the subsequent roles into the family-run business. And I share a similar experience there as well. I started enlisted in the United States Navy. Today, I'm an officer, but like, I remember days that I was scrubbing the bottom of the helicopter. Like, I understand what it's like on Thanksgiving Eve to be getting soap in your mouth that turns your mouth numb, and the insight that gives you into people and how to lead and how to manage and how to optimize. It's invaluable. There's like three follow-up questions. I'm trying to figure out where to take this. Like, do we go down the sales path? But the one interesting thing that you talked about was this idea of aligning family members. And this might have a lot of value, especially to organizations that are operating on EOS or considering operating on EOS, which is, you go out and so it's a COO president type. So in the EOS land, we would call that an integrator. How do you get, like, tactically, how do you get 8 family members to agree on bringing in a second command, who that individual is going to be, what their priorities are going to be? Did some people move to the owner's box? Like, was that the way?
It was a journey. It wasn't a snap decision. That process took over a year. It might have even been a year and a half. we interviewed different candidates. We got a sense in terms of what, before we interviewed anybody, we tried to make sure that we were clear on what we were looking for. And that's part of why EOS helped so much, is because when we had an accountability chart that was crystal clear about what the structure of the organization needed to be in order for us to take our business from where we were to where we wanted to go, then we were able to objectively see, well, okay, where do we have people that might not fully GWC their seat, get it, want it, and have the capacity to be excellent in that role? When I would say, any family business will often have not only family members, but people in the business that fall into one of three categories. They're either family members and or owners and or business leaders, right, at the leadership team. There was a study, I think, done by Harvard in the 70s, popularized by Sarah B. Stern, who is also an amazing professional or certified EOS implementer. And those three circles are often converged by the confusion that people have an identity as, I'm an owner, I'm a leader, I'm this, I'm in sales, I'm a visionary, I'm an integrator, whatever the seats that they're sitting in, and they almost take on that identity. And it's interesting. The family business that I came from, our consumers had an identity about the product that they used and the process with which they used it from us. They would identify as either knitters or crocheters. It was who they were. It wasn't just something that they did. It was who they were. And so if our customers could do that, you could imagine that we might be, prevalent to do the same. But when we stood back, we said, okay, let's take a step back from the roles that we're sitting in. Doesn't matter if we're an owner or business leader or family member, irrespective of all of that. What does the company need for the business to move forward? What's the right structure to take us from where we are to where we need to go? And when we were actually looking objectively at that, some of the people who were sitting in seats that they had been sitting in for a really long time, they started to realize, I really don't want to be doing this. I want to be doing something. I want to be useful. I'm not looking to retire per se, but I don't want to necessarily be doing this anymore. Maybe I wanted it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 30 years ago, but maybe I don't really want that now. And that's okay. And so I think the message that I would convey to any family member is focus on the business first. What does the business need? What is for the greater good of the business at large that will serve the company as a whole most effectively? If we can make decisions with that mindset, then the business can take care of the family. That was something that I learned from my dad, who learned it from his dad. Like, you got to take care of the business first, and then the family stuff will work itself out. As soon as a family business starts making decisions based on the family's needs before the business's needs, that's when all stuff goes to hell. That's when things really go sideways, because now it's not about the objective needs of the business. It's about my personal agenda, his, hers. It gets all wonky. And so if we focus on what is best for the business, who's the best candidate to take the business forward in that particular function or seat, that's what will help. And so people have to let go to a certain extent of sometimes even their identity, which is really hard. And so, one of the messages that I'm sharing more broadly is that, I learned this early on in my career at Walmart, was that change is the only constant, right? And we know this, right? And anybody who's tried to not change at all, like, good luck with that. Let me know how it goes, right? Because you could either embrace it or you can get run over by it. Like, those are the choices. I choose to embrace it because it's way better than getting run over. For sure. I've had some change happen where, not run over, but I've had some spills that I definitely needed to be put back together, Humpty Dumpty style, in a couple of ways. Whether it was learning how not to dirt bike or learning how not to fall skiing, I've fractured clavicles, and funny enough, I broke my humerus last year skiing. I thought that was interesting. Of all the bones to break, I thought that was a funny one to break. But you know what? When these types of things, it doesn't just have to be accidents, but when circumstances can often lead people to think that things are happening to them. And so what I try to take the approach is that things don't happen to us, they happen for us. And so if things happen for us, what's the learning? I need a growth mindset in order to be able to handle stepping out of my comfort zone. I might have been doing this for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 50 years. I need courage and I need like some comfort to know that it's going to be okay. And stepping into the unknown is not going to be the end of me, but rather it's going to help me become more of who I'm actually meant to be for the long haul. In order for me to actualize my potential, or in order for each person to maximize their own potential, they have to get out of the comfort zone of where they're comfortable. When I stepped out of my comfort zone and went to apply for a job at Walmart, that was not what any of my friends or family had ever done. It was bucking the trend. It was swimming upstream, which, by the way, Sam Walton has 10 rules for building a business. Number 10 was always my favorite, swimming upstream. Probably no surprise that was number 10. Number 10 was my number one. So I've just embraced that. But whether it was going and getting a job at Walmart or leaving Walmart to go join the family business after I had a career trajectory path that I was kind of blazing that way, it took courage to step away and join the family business. And frankly, it took even more courage to sell out of a lifelong journey that I was on to that point 3 years ago, where I had spent my entire life, my dad had spent his entire life, my grandfather, like it was a generational legacy. So making the decision to sell an ownership position in a company that I had never known to be not part of my family was it took courage to take that step out of my comfort zone. But in order to do that, I had to recognize that, I love this quote. I don't remember where I heard it, so I wish I can give credit where credit is due. But people often say, "Is the glass half full or half empty?" Right? The pessimist says, "Is it it's half empty?" An optimist, you might think, says it's half full, but really, I say, who cares? It's refillable. Let's not just look at what the status quo is. Let's look at what the possibility is. Look at what the potential could be. I could use this glass over and over again. So it might be half full right now, but I can drink it and then refill it and keep using it for years to come. And so I think the importance of courage and resilience will help people step out of that position, company, status, relationship, whatever it might be that's holding you back from achieving your actual potential. And I think that's probably the key to answer that question.
You talked a little bit about this idea of if you focus on the business will take care of the family. Is there a time or what are those moments where, because we all wear many hats, especially like when you're in a startup world, or if it's a family business, like you've got your owner hat and then you have your core function hat. And so this notion of like focus on the health of the business, when do you take off that core function or what you're doing inside of the business and put on your owner hat? Is that like, what do I want from this business and like what is my place moving forward? Does that never happen and eventually there's just some sort of event or opportunities that come up? I guess the question is there a time and a place to interchange those hats and think about things differently?
So I would say yes, but it's important to be clear on where and when those are. As it's funny, as I think of my entrepreneurial journey, I started my full-time career working at Walmart, and then I went to the family business, and then I started my own company. So it's like the inverse of most entrepreneurial journeys. Like most people start a business, they bring some family or friends together, they hopefully can grow it to unicorn status, have $1 billion valuation, and have an exit. I started the Fortune 1, then I worked my way down to a company of one. But every step of the way helped me understand different context for what challenges, both good challenges and maybe sometimes negative challenges, exist along the way. And so as I think about that question of when to take on or off the owner's hat, when to put on the function hat, it depends on what conversation you're having or what meeting you're having or what decisions have to be made at that particular time. when you're in a level 10 meeting as part of the leadership team, there are no owners in a level 10 meeting. There are only function leaders on the team at that particular moment. It doesn't mean that some of those same people, maybe even all of them, they may also be owners, but they're not owners in the sense of that meeting. So I think it's really important to recognize when I'm having a leadership team meeting, I'm wearing my leadership team function hat. And if I'm sitting in multiple seats, probably not as comfortable, but definitely be clear on which hat you're wearing when speaking about whatever specific topic that you're speaking about. But from an owner's perspective, I think it's important to have, the same way it's important to have a weekly cadence or a quarterly cadence of meeting on a regular basis in the business, it's also important to have a regular cadence of meetings to work on the business. So, in EOS, we have quarterly and annual meetings where an implementer like myself, if a company is working with an implementer, or if they're self-implementing, they might do this on their own, will come and help the leadership team get clear on working on the business, focused on what are the priorities for the next quarter and or year, depending on when they're meeting. Reflect on the last quarter, see how they did, recheck their vision, make sure they're on the same page, set a new plan for the next quarter, and then they go back in their business and run like heck for another 90 days. But from an owner's perspective, you similarly have to take a pulse on where the business is at. Are we getting what we are looking to achieve? Are we accomplishing what is not only important and meaningful, but necessary? Like, what is necessary to be accomplished? And are we making it possible for what is necessary to be accomplished? Are we setting the management team up for success? It's almost like you have the general manager of the Yankees, which they're down 3-0 right now in the World Series. But like, hopefully they can come back and win 4 straight and echo the 2004 Red Sox. But regardless of what happens, as soon as the off season comes, the general manager is going to have a bunch of decisions to make about the off season: what free agents to re-sign, who he can trade, who he cannot trade, who he wants to keep. But ultimately, once the season starts, he's got to give it to the manager, the manager of the team, and the hitting coach, batting coach, all like they're going to have to handle it within the season. And so the owners, it's almost the Steinbrenner family, owns the Yankees. They're going to give the power to those people who they feel will help them achieve their ultimate goal of winning that next World Series and continuing to win each and every year to the best of their ability. And so as owners, what we have to do is we have to set our people up for success. We have to put the right people in the management seats. Not that the owners are making all the decisions for the management team, but they're ultimately deciding who's going to be the visionary or who's going to be perhaps the integrator. But after that, it's kind of up to the integrator to manage the rest of the team. The integrator in that regard is almost like Aaron Boone on the Yankees at this point. But just to take the baseball analogy, it's timely. But what we have to do in the business is keep swinging the bat. We got to make good pitches. We got to do all the things, run the bases well, no unforced errors. We got to do what we have to do to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. But as an owner, we have to not only put people in the position to be successful that we trust, but also give them the autonomy to make decisions. But every so often, we got to just, hey, are we getting what we want from the business? Are we getting are we hitting our profitability goals? Are we hitting our, maybe there's sustainability goals, maybe there's charitable goals, whatever the goals of what the purpose of the business is, are we achieving those? Are we exceeding them? If we are, great. If we, how can we maximize those? So it's almost like a different plane that they're playing on. And so the owner's box should meet regularly, but it shouldn't interfere and muddle in the day-to-day, Hank Steinbrenner shouldn't be calling, Aaron Judge and be like, why'd you swing at that pitch?
These are very timely analogies, by the way, all of them. I love that. And I think that gives so much insight. And because I hear this, I've not been a part of a family business. I have been inside of this kind of.
To be fair, I haven't been part of a baseball organization directly.
But we can infer, right? And that's what's important here is there's so many different parallels. There's so many things that are similar between not just baseball and business. I think you articulated that extremely well because it gives somebody a clear picture of like how the operation should be handled. Um, but I hear about this stuff all the time, and there's definitely correlations between even if it's not a family-run business, but there are partners or there's a board in place, and these are additional complexities that businesses are dealing with day in and day out. And like, how do you deal with a board? You know, how does a management team make suggestions versus like, you know,
One piece at a
understanding
time.
what's
You just
happening?
move the piece along the board, one piece at a time.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's not like Candyland where you have like the big slide. Um, but no, in all seriousness, I think that it's really not that different in the sense every company is different, the structures are different. Yes, that's true, but fundamentally, if there's a board, it's not that different than having an owner's box. Granted, there might be owners and a board. I recognize that, but each one is serves in a similar capacity in that they should meet regularly, be clear on what their goals and what is necessary for them to see being accomplished is happening. Um, they should give the autonomy to those business leaders or managers to make the decisions to help achieve the goals or not. And every whatever frequency is relevant for them, they should assess whether the people that they have empowered to lead the business are getting the job done or not. And if they are, great. And if they're not, what can they do to course correct to help address it? It doesn't mean that everybody needs to just get fired or not fired. That's not what I'm saying. A lot of times there's some slight course corrections that need to be made, and you can make tweaks that leveraging the team that you have, assuming that they're the right people, they fit the core values, et cetera, and they have the GWC their respective seats. You have to be clear on where you're going. Yogi Berra said, if you don't know where you're going, you might not get there. Well, we're going with the Yankee thing. So a lot of times, in my experience, some of the confusion that exists is a direct result of not being clearly aligned on where we're trying to go. How we're going to get there is somewhat semantic. But if we don't know where we're going, it's like the GPS destination, you cannot put into Waze, I want to just drive around, right? You don't need Waze for that. If you want to just drive around aimlessly, you could do that without Waze. You don't need a GPS to do that. But if you want to use a GPS to help you get somewhere, turn-by-turn directions don't help you if you don't put an actual destination in. So you got to know where the destination is, and then you can get 3 or 4 different variations in terms of options. You want to hit traffic on the Grand Central, you want to hit traffic on the Van Wyck, you want to hit traffic on the Belt Parkway. You can hit traffic wherever you want in the New York metro area. It's very easy to do. It's just a matter of which traffic you want to sit in, right? But that we could debate all day. But what we shouldn't be debating for a really long time is where we're trying to go. Because if we don't know that, let's figure that out first. It's amazing. Sometimes I talk to prospects that are considering implementing EOS, and I ask them, what do you want from this business that you're not getting today? And they, I don't know. I haven't thought about that. It's like, wait, so you're working your business for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. You've never thought about what you actually want from your business? Let's start there. What do you want from your business that you're not getting today? Like if you could have anything, well, you can't have everything. Where would you put it, right? So you can't have everything. But if you could have anything, what would be the one thing that would make everything a little better? It doesn't, like, we're not talking about magic pills or silver bullets, but what would make the day-to-day and what would make everybody in your business more energized? What would be something that would be energizing for everyone? What would that, or what would make things just easier? Take complexity out of the car, or at least on some level. Again, we're not talking about perfection, but just what would make it a little easier, a little better? If we can identify what these things are that we want, stop for a minute. What do we want for the business? Sometimes it's more revenue. I can help with that. Sometimes it's alignment. I can help with that too. But sometimes it's just more peace of mind. Sometimes it's, I want to be able to go and take my kid to the baseball game and not have to worry about all the millions of emails I'm going to get in the meantime and like who's going to handle them like if I'm out for 3-4 hours. One of the most amazing things over the last year and a half is that I've been able to take 3 or I think 4 vacations of at least a week or longer each where I did not open my laptop once, each of them. I never could have done that years ago. And I knew that it was going to be okay when I got back. Like I wasn't like hashtag did not die. Uh, it that level of peace of mind is something that most entrepreneurs can't even imagine when they start before they start implementing EOS. And so what I love about EOS is that it allows entrepreneurs, if they follow the process, which is proven and really works if you use the tools the way they're intended, it allows them to ultimately live their EOS life, which is doing what they love with people they love, making a huge difference, getting compensated appropriately, and having time to pursue other passions. I've yet to meet anybody who hears that and says, "Yeah, it sounds like a terrible idea."
And what as you're kind of going through this, and we've talked about the owner's box and whether that's the board or the actual owners and places in the accountability chart. You spoke about kind of this frequency, and so making sure that they're just like there's level 10s and quarterly pulses and annual planning sessions. There's something similar that's set up for the owner's box or the board or whatever is sitting kind of off to the side of the company. That's helping to make sure that the wherever we're going is clearly articulated and identified. When there's conflicts between those two, like what's the best way? Because you brought up the analogy. I forget who it was, so forgive me, but I'm sure it was the owner of the Yankees calling Aaron Judge. So whoever that is, like you don't want to be like, hey, why'd you swing at that pitch? So what does that interaction look like? Like should the owner's box be only kind of synced with a single person in the organization? Should it be the visionary and integrator? How do you see that in practice?
So in my experience, the most effective way that I have seen that to be done is that, yes, there is dialogue between whether it's the owner's box or a board with usually a single contact on the leadership team. It's typically the visionary. It can be the integrator. At times it's both. That's okay too, but again, from a simplicity standpoint, the less people you're talking to, the more clear things generally will be conveyed. So if there's a single point of contact, it's usually easier to convey. But the visionary and or integrator, if they're the conduit to make sure that the messages that are coming from the board or the owner's box are being conveyed effectively, it's a two-way street. It's not just a one-way street, right? So the board and or owners might convey information that they want the management team or leadership team to be aware of. So the visionary and or integrator might convey that, but then also they would want to get feedback, and there should be a feedback loop going back that same way, where the visionary would or integrator would then report back either pre-quarterlies, post-quarterlies, pre-annuals, post-annuals, what have you. But every team should craft what the right cadence is for them. Some boards and or owners box teams might meet before the annual or quarterly meetings with the let's say the visionary. Sometimes it's after. There's no right or wrong there. It's just, but be consistent, whatever it is. To the extent that you become like helicopter owners or helicopter board members, where you're hovering in, or I heard this one recently. This was great. Like seagull leadership is definitely not the way to go, where you swoop in, crap all over everything, and then fly back out.
I like that. I'm going to steal that one. I'll give you credit.
That was great. That unfortunately happens way too often, and so rather than do that, let's have a regular cadence of what meetings need to be, both at that level and then communicating up and down, so that there is a way to convey whatever is necessary in a functional, cohesive manner that doesn't disrupt the day-to-day of the business. So I think it's no different if it's a sports team or if it's a leadership team with a board or an owner's box. And there's one other caveat that I think, especially in family businesses, doesn't get talked about enough. But it's the non-board members, non-owners, non-business leaders that sometimes have a ton of influence in the business, but there isn't always a clear communication path for them. And it's often the spouses of the owners or of the leaders or of the family members. And that's something that can also be very influential, positively or negatively. If you have a bunch of spouses chirping in their husbands or wives' ears about what should or shouldn't happen in the business, and they are not owners, and they're not family members, and they're not, I mean, directly, or they're not business members of the team. That can have an effect. But the truth of the matter is, I think the best way to handle that is no different than a board or an owner's box. It's like, hey, let's have a meeting every so often to share what's going on. This is what's happening. This is what isn't. These are some of the decisions that have been made, and it can squelch any potential negative influence, I think, that might come from other sources that are not always as traditionally thought of as influential.
I love that. And it's like the lines of communication and how do you open them, and how do you account for all the voices and all the stakeholders, which sometimes aren't completely apparent, especially to everybody in both sides. I love that seagull analogy you just brought up, and I've dealt with a couple boards, and we had some real issues, and the issue wasn't necessary. I mean, and obviously, like when conflict starts, then it's like, well, they don't know what they're talking about, and they've got no operator experience, and these people are running the business into the ground, and it starts these things. But there's like, if there's three different types of let's call it planning. You've got strategic, operational, and tactical. So like, where's this thing going? Okay, how do we operationalize this? And then what are the tactics we're going to use to kind of unlock these things? What I found sitting in the visionary seat and sometimes the integrator seat is that when boards got more involved in the tactical decisions, it was the seagull analogy. And the reason is like, you can say, hey, this is where we want this company to go. But if you don't have boots on the ground and understand all the nuances and all of the things that are happening inside of the organization between that gap, maybe the gap is a quarter, maybe it's a month, whatever those frequencies are, but your ideas are tactical in nature, and it's like, do this, do that. That's where I've seen that seagull analogy in real time.
Well, and I also think that one of the things that, I mean, a great tool to utilize to prevent seagull leadership, well, let's call it, is an issues list. And if oftentimes, again, this is just my experience, oftentimes people who have a voice or aren't necessarily officially having a voice but want to have their voice heard, sometimes the motivation is really just that, to have their voice heard. And it doesn't always mean that every decision that is made has to be aligned with what the suggestion or the idea was, but they often just want to know that they've been heard. And so I think one of the ways that I've seen effectively that issues list be utilized is to say, hey, you know what? I got that idea or that issue. I'm going to add it to the issues list. And so the next time we have our whatever meeting, whether it's in the business, whether it's on the business, etc., we're gonna bring that to the table. And even though that person might not even be in the meeting, knowing that it's going to go on the issues list and it's going to be addressed at the appropriate time is sometimes enough to allow them to not continue to swoop in and meddle in ways that, frankly, is not most beneficial for the company.
Gosh, I really wanted to take the conversation to the sales thing because it's intriguing, but I realize we're short on time. We might have to do a part 2 of this because we've covered a third of the topics that have just like come up through this casual conversation that I would love to go deep on. Because I think one of the things that might be in the brains of the audience right now is like, what are some of the fundamental things that you learned on the sales side? But I think that's going to take more than 3 minutes to really unpack.
Yeah, well, I'll give just a quick thought on that. One of the things that I have found to be so underappreciated and underutilized is the phone. How many people, let me ask you, when was the last time you got a call from someone, a business related call, when nothing was wrong?
Almost, there is one person that comes to mind. He is an EOS implementer, and somehow him and I have had, like, we've just synced, and he is the only person in the business world that just picks up the phone every month and just says, hey, how you doing?
I love that. But you were able to think of that person on the spot because it's so infrequent that happens.
Never happens.
Right? Otherwise, other than that implementer, that doesn't happen. We've gotten so comfortable hiding behind text messages and LinkedIn messages and WhatsApp and email and social media and all the things, it's almost to the point where the phone app on your phone is like the least used app on the phone.
Yes. Yeah,
Right?
it's true.
I mean, it's kind of crazy. But let me just share with you something that I've experienced over the last 6 months. When I pick up the phone and call people proactively when nothing is wrong, and I ask them, "Hey, how's your family? How you doing? How are things? What's going on?" Just show genuine curiosity and care, and then ask like in a help first way, like, "Hey, is there anything you're working on that I can help you with, or maybe someone in my network could help you with? I just want to help." Usually, the response I get is, I'm so appreciative that you called. And whether they have something specific or not is not so much the point, but it's about picking up the phone and calling people proactively. That one action has changed the trajectory of my business in the last 6 months significantly. I've booked more clients, more 90s, more referrals just by picking up the phone and calling people proactively. But the part two of it is I can only control the action that I take, which means I can control picking it up and calling. I cannot control if someone answers. But you know what? I don't frankly care if they answer or not, because that's out of my control. I mean, I'd like to speak to them. I'm not calling them just for the sake of calling them. I'm calling them because I genuinely want to connect. But I can't worry about what's out of my control. So I just focus on the reach outs. I focus on the dials. I focus on what I can do that I am in full control over, which makes it systematic and more predictable. I can easily make 3 calls a day. Oh, and by the way, if they don't pick up, I leave a voicemail and send a follow-up text. 2 out of 3 people will get back to you if you do that.
And nobody, by the way, to your question of who calls people, also who leaves voicemails? Nobody.
If you call,
everybody calls.
So if they don't answer and you leave a voicemail and you send a follow-up text, you will get a response 66, 67% of the time. It's amazing. But again, it's got to come from a point of genuine curiosity and care with a help-first approach. It's not, what can you do for me? It's no, what can I do for you? How can I help you? What's in it for them? My focus is on how I can help them. And if that is something that more people would do, the result would be more people want to do business with you because you're helping. You're coming from a place of abundance. I like to say, be a grower, not a knower, right? Because if you're growing, if you're focusing on helping others, not I know everything or I know everybody or anybody who wants to talk to me, they'll call me. That's a knower mindset. No, but a grower mindset is I'm going to pick up the phone and ask how I can help. I got a message. I saw a message on a WhatsApp group yesterday, an entrepreneurial referral network group, where somebody said, "Anybody know of an EOS implementer?" There were 4 or 5 people that responded with different names of all fantastic EOS implementers. I saw the post and I said, "Happy to help if I can." And then after I sent the message, I picked up the phone and I called the person who sent the message. And he said, "You're the first person to call me." I said, "How can I help?" And I had a 45-minute conversation with the guy. Right? So it's not just about knowing what to do. It's about doing what we know. A lot of us know this, but we got to do it. So knowing is not enough. That's why we got to be a grower, not a knower.
I love it, Evan. I've got a page of notes. There's the everything with like the board and the owner's box and what are those interactions, and then how you clearly portrayed the correlation between baseball. Like it makes it easier to picture how that works.
Just to close the loop on the baseball analogy, every time we pick up the phone and call, that's another swing, right? Every time we pick up the phone, we're swinging the bat. We can control when we swing or not. We can't control if we're going to really make contact. We can't control where the ball's going to go if we do make contact. We can control whether we pick up the bat and swing.
It's so ingrained in me now that I almost just called you Aaron Judge. So like that's how impactful that story was.
I'll take it. I'll try not to have my Judge saboteur get in the way here.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate you sharing 60 minutes with me. Would actually love to have you back on, and like we can go deeper in some of these other topics.
Love to do it.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aaron.